Welcome, students, to your Human and Social Biology class. I am your teacher, Mr. Heron. Today we'll be looking at the nitrogen cycle. Our objectives for this class are: how is nitrogen cycled, and what are the processes involved in the nitrogen cycle? So nitrogen is very important to all living organisms. In fact, it makes up approximately 78 to 80% of the air around us. Nitrogen is, however, inert, which means that most living organisms can't use nitrogen in its pure form. In order for nitrogen to be used by most living organisms, it has to be converted to an ion called nitrate, which can be absorbed by plants. Now, we're going to be looking at the steps involved in the nitrogen cycle. And we want to pay attention to three specific terms, and we'll get into that later. Now, it's important to remember that most living organisms cannot use nitrogen in its pure form. It has to be converted to an ion called nitrates in order for plants to use them. So let's begin. Nitrogen is present in the air around us. Lightning causes a reaction between nitrogen and oxygen, which forms nitrogen oxide. This nitrogen oxide gets dissolved in rain, where it seeps through the soil and is stored as nitrates. Now, in this form, the plants are able to use the nitrates. Now, when farmers use fertilizer, they are introducing nitrate to the soil. As a result, plants can use the nitrates. Now, there are some plants, but more specifically, leguminous plants, plants that are legumes. They have these nodules in their root, which houses bacteria. Now, these bacteria are called nitrogen-fixing bacteria. And what these bacteria do, they take nitrogen from the air and fix it into nitrate. This process is called nitrogen fixation. So let's record that. Nitrogen fixation. And nitrogen fixation is done by nitrogen fixing bacteria. Nitrogen fixing bacteria. So the nitrogen fixing bacteria takes nitrogen from the air, fixes it to make nitrates, which plants can assimilate or absorb. Next, we have living organisms. Now, living organisms will produce waste. They'll produce urine. Now, this urine will be broken down into urea, and then later, bacteria will turn this urea into ammonium. Then nitrifying bacteria will take ammonium and convert it to nitrite, which is later transformed or converted to nitrate. And we call these bacteria nitrifying bacteria. And the process is called nitrification. So nitrification, and this is carried out by nitrifying bacteria. Nitrifying bacteria. Now, these nitrifying bacteria will convert ammonium to nitrite, and then eventually it becomes nitrates. Now, so far we have seen how nitrogen has been converted to nitrate, but how is nitrate then converted back to nitrogen? Well, we have bacteria in the soil called denitrifying bacteria. And what they do, they take nitrate, denitrifies it, and then it returns to the atmosphere as nitrogen. So we call this process denitrification. Denitrification. And this is made possible by denitrifying bacteria. And there you have it, students. The cycle continues, and there you have it, a simple diagram of the nitrogen cycle. So let's recap. Nitrogen makes up approximately 78 to 80% of the air around us. In its pure form, nitrogen is inert, which means that most living organisms cannot use nitrogen in its pure form. It has to be converted to an ion called nitrates. Nitrates can be absorbed by plants. Animals eat plants, humans eat plants, and that's how we get our nitrogen. All right? In the nitrogen cycle, there is nitrogen in the air around us. Lightning causes a reaction between nitrogen and oxygen, which forms nitrogen oxide, which dissolves in the rain, seeps into the soil, and is stored as nitrates, which plants can absorb. There are some plants, leguminous plants, plants that are legumes. They have tiny nodules in their root. These nodules have nitrogen fixing bacteria, which takes nitrogen from the air, fixes the nitrogen to make nitrate, which plants can assimilate or absorb. Living organisms will produce waste matter, urine or feces. This is broken down by decomposers into ammonia. This process is, in ammonium. This process is called ammonification. This is then broken down by nitrifying bacteria to make nitrite, which is later converted to nitrates. Now, nitrates are then denitrified by denitrifying bacteria through a process called denitrification, which turns nitrates back into nitrogen. And there you have it, boys and girls. Simple diagram of the nitrogen cycle. Thanks for joining. I hope you learned something.